Opening, what if I told you that a quiet revolution is happening in the global energy market? And Canada, yes, Canada is at the center of it, with over 170 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, much of which comes from the oil sands of Alberta. Canada holds the third largest oil reserves, in the world, but rising tensions between the US and Canada, one of the world's largest energy suppliers, is shifting its focus away from its largest customer and eyeing new markets in Europe and Asia. This move could change the global energy landscape and affect everything from your gas prices to your electricity bill. Curious? Let's break it down. In today's video, we're diving deep into how Canada's energy strategy is being reshaped by new trade dynamics. After years of being the US's #1 energy supplier, Canada is turning its attention to Europe and Asia, driven by geopolitical tensions and the need to secure long-term energy security. But what does this mean for global energy markets? And how will it impact you, the everyday consumer? Stick around as we explore this bold shift and what it could mean for the future of energy, both at home and abroad. Chapter 1. Canada's energy reserves and historic dependence on US markets. Canada is one of the world's energy giants, with over 170 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, much of which comes from the oil sands of Alberta. Canada holds the third largest oil reserves, in the world, only behind Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Canada also has vast reserves of natural gas, critical minerals, like uranium, and abundant freshwater resources. Historically, the US has been Canada's largest trading partner, and the energy trade between the two countries is one of the most significant aspects of this relationship. The US depends on Canada for over 64% of its crude oil imports, and nearly 100% of its natural gas imports, making Canada the single largest supplier of energy to the US. For context, in 2021, the US imported roughly 3.8 million barrels of oil per day from Canada, far more than any other country. Canada's role is vital because US refineries, especially in the Midwest, are optimized to process Canadian heavy crude oil, which is cheaper and easier to refine into products like gasoline and diesel. For Canadians, this trade has meant relatively stable and affordable energy prices. The close proximity and reliability of the US as a market help keep domestic prices lower. However, the ongoing US trade tensions may disrupt this stability, leading to potential increases in energy prices in Canada and North America as a whole. Chapter 2. The US tariffs and trade tensions. In 2018, President Donald Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, and in 2019, he threatened a 10% tariff on Canadian oil, although that never fully materialized. This tariff escalation signaled a shift towards protectionist policies, causing significant shockwaves in the traditionally open and collaborative US-Canada energy relationship. In response to these actions, Canada began seeking alternatives to reduce its dependence on the US. This meant focusing on global energy markets, particularly in Europe and Asia, which both represent high growth potential for Canadian energy exports. The US tariffs were particularly impactful because Canada is the largest supplier of oil and natural gas to the USG, making this relationship pivotal to US energy security. For Canada, trade diversification is now a top priority, and it's pursuing these markets to avoid being overly reliant on the US market, which can be unpredictable due to political shifts. For everyday Canadians, higher tariffs on Canadian exports, especially oil and natural gas, could result in higher prices at the gas pump. With Canada seeking new markets, initial disruptions in trade could increase transport and production costs, impacting consumer goods across various sectors. Chapter 3. Canada's strategic energy diversification with the US. Tariffs threatening to disrupt the traditional energy trade, Canada's government has set a bold goal to increase its non-US energy exports by 50% by 2025. This objective is not just about seeking out new markets, but also about enhancing the resilience of Canada's energy sector. Europe is a particularly attractive market. The European Union, with a population of over 450 million, has long relied on energy imports due to limited domestic energy production. In 2020, Europe imported 57.5% of its oil. The EU is also undergoing an energy transition to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels, but it still remains heavily dependent on energy imports. Canada's abundant natural gas reserves and low-cost oil could play a key role in Europe's energy mix in the coming years. In Asia, countries like China, Japan, and South Korea are among the largest energy consumers globally. In 2020, China accounted for approximately 26% of the world's total energy consumption, making it the largest energy consumer globally, and it continues to grow rapidly. Canada's move to diversify its energy exports to Asia is vital for capturing this growing demand. Chapter 4. Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement (CETA) with the EU. A cornerstone of Canada's strategy is the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement (CETA) with the European Union, which was signed in 2016 and provisionally applied in 2017. The agreement eliminates tariffs on almost all goods traded between Canada and the EU, including energy products like oil, natural gas, and electricity. CETA also grants Canadian companies preferential access to the EU market, which is the second largest energy consumer in the world after China. In 2020, the EU imported about 8.7 million barrels per day of crude oil, with a significant portion coming from politically stable regions like Canada. By expanding exports to Europe, Canada can reduce its reliance on the US and enhance its energy security. However, CETA's full ratification is still pending. 10 EU member states, including Italy, Ireland, and Poland, have not yet ratified the agreement, which has delayed some of the economic benefits that would otherwise have been realized. Nonetheless, Canadian businesses are optimistic about the potential to grow their market share in Europe. For Canadians, a fully ratified CETA would mean cheaper goods imported from the EU and possibly lower energy prices, especially oil and natural gas. More importantly, CETA would open up new markets for Canadian companies, potentially driving economic growth and creating new jobs in sectors like manufacturing, agriculture, and technology. Chapter 5. Global Energy Implications. The shift in Canadian energy exports has significant implications for global energy security. The US remains one of the world's largest energy consumers and a net exporter of oil and gas, but it still depends heavily on Canada to supply 24% of its crude oil consumption and 9% of its natural gas. This energy integration is vital for US energy stability, particularly in regions like the Midwest, where refineries are specifically designed to process Canadian heavy crude oil. If Canada successfully diversifies its energy exports to the EU and Asia, the US could face higher energy costs and more uncertainty regarding its energy supply. Canada's oil and natural gas help stabilize US energy prices, and losing this supply could disrupt US energy markets and increase reliance on more volatile sources like Venezuela or the Middle East. For American consumers, a potential reduction in Canadian energy imports could lead to higher gas prices at the pump, as the US might have to look elsewhere for energy supplies, especially from regions with more geopolitical risks. This could lead to a spike in energy costs and instability in the US market. Chapter 6. The role of LNG in Asia. One of the most promising areas of growth for Canada's energy exports is its liquefied natural gas (LNG) potential. Canada is poised to become a major LNG supplier to Asia, with 6 major LNG export projects currently under development, including the LNG Canada project in British Columbia, which will begin operations in 2023. Phase 1 of the LNG Canada export facility is nearing completion and aims to commence LNG exports by mid-2025. This initial phase is projected to have an export capacity of approximately 1.84 billion cubic feet per day (BKFDL). A proposed Phase 2 expansion could potentially double this capacity, adding an additional 1.84 BKFD, contingent upon a final investment decision. Asia's demand for natural gas is growing rapidly. China alone is expected to import 80 million metric tons (MMT) in 2025, while Japan remains one of the world's largest LNG importers. For Canadians, this means that their natural gas bills could be lower, as new trade routes could free up domestic supply. In the US, this could help stabilize energy costs and ensure that natural gas prices remain affordable for consumers, especially in northern states where natural gas heating is critical. Ending Canada's move to diversify its energy exports beyond the US is reshaping the global energy landscape. This transition is driven by both geopolitical pressures like US tariffs and the need for long-term energy security. While the US-Canada relationship will remain vital, Canada's new energy export strategy to Europe and Asia presents an exciting opportunity to expand trade and strengthen global energy security. For everyday Canadians and Americans, this could mean fluctuating energy prices in the short term, but more stable and resilient energy markets in the future. As Canada's energy exports to new markets increase, we could see lower domestic energy costs and greater investment in clean and sustainable energy.